Hi, I'm Rebecca from Ingvid.com. In this lesson, you'll learn how to introduce yourself and also how to introduce people who don't know each other. Now, sometimes you learn a lot of English and you still feel nervous. You don't feel confident doing simple things. So this is one of those simple but important things that you need to be able to do, to be able to walk up to someone, to introduce yourself, and also to know how to respond when someone does that. And that may be true whether you're at a business conference or at a party. Okay, so let's get started. So here, first, we'll talk about the formal situation. So let's say we'll start over here. Hello, I'm Bill White. The response is, hi, I'm Susan Jones. So he says then, it's a pleasure to meet you. And she says, it's a pleasure to meet you too. Okay? Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Why? Because especially at this part, we're just repeating what the other person says, except that you're adding the word to. Okay? Let's try it again. Hello, I'm Bill White. Now, at that point, you probably want to also shake hands. So let me mention that. So the things that you should do in addition to what you're going to say are these things. You should try to maintain a straight posture because you look more professional that way, especially in a business situation. In a North American context, also, we establish eye contact. All right, that shows that we're not afraid. That shows we're not hiding anything. All right, shows confidence. And you want to give a firm handshake. Okay, don't keep your hand really weak. Keep it firm, not hard. Don't squeeze the other person's hand, but make a firm handshake. And this is true whether you're a man or a woman. And usually we smile because it's a little bit, it shows that you're a friendly person and you're happy to meet the other person, even in a business situation. So let's get started. And what I was saying is about the handshake, you could shake hands right here. So you could say, hello, I'm Bill White. Or you could say it at this point when you say, it's a pleasure to meet you. Okay? Hello, I'm Bill White. Hi, I'm Susan Jones. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you too. And if you want, one thing you can do is to mention the person's name when you're saying it's a pleasure to meet you, okay? But sometimes in a business context, you're not yet sure whether to say Ms. Jones or Susan, so you could try it. And you could say, it's a pleasure to meet you, Ms. Jones. And she might say, oh, you can call me Susan. It's a pleasure to meet you too. And so on, okay? But main thing is, this part is just repeated. Next, in an informal situation. So here, instead of saying hello, we're just going to say hi. Hi, I'm George. Hi, I'm Maria. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Again, we're just repeating. So what happened? Here, it's a little more formal. So we said, it's a pleasure to meet you. And here, because it's informal, we just said, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Okay? So just repeat that. And also, instead of hello, we're just saying hi. All right? Hi, I'm George. Hi, I'm Maria. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Okay, so try that. Next, I'll show you how to introduce people who don't know each other. So let's see how to introduce people to each other. First, we'll do this in a formal situation, okay? So let's pretend in this scenario that there are three people. You are Carol Smith, and you know Scott Topper, and you know Stephen Shaw, but they don't know each other. But you don't know that, so you have to find out first, because sometimes people do know each other. So Carol is going to speak first. So Carol knows both of them, all right? So she says, Carol Smith says, have you met each other? So let's say she turns to one of them or to either of them, and she says, so Scott answers, and he says, no, we haven't. Sometimes this person will answer, sometimes both of those people will answer kind of at the same time, say, no, we haven't. Doesn't matter. And then Carol says, if it's a formal situation, Mr. Topper, this is Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw, this is Mr. Topper. Now, sometimes this part is not necessary because it's kind of obvious. So usually if you just say the first part, people will start introducing themselves then to each other or continue with the pleasure to meet you. But if you want to know the traditional way in which it's done like that. Okay, so Mr. Topper, this is Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw, this is Mr. Topper. And At that point also, when you're deciding whose name to say first, some of the rules of protocol are that if there is an older person and a younger person, you introduce the older person to the younger person, okay? So let's say in this situation that Mr. Topper is older, then you would say Mr. Topper's name first. If they're both about the same age, it doesn't matter, okay? So then Mr. Topper, remember the earlier lessons we learned, what we learned just now, the expression, it's a pleasure to meet you. And Shaw says, pleasure to meet you too, okay? You don't always have to repeat the entire expression, it's a pleasure to meet you. Even in a formal situation, it's fine to say, pleasure to meet you too, because that's the critical part, all right? So now that's the formal scenario. Let's go through it one more time. Have you met each other? No, we haven't. Mr. Topper, this is Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Topper, it's a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet you too. And remember, at this point, when Mr. Topper says, it's a pleasure to meet you, that's when Mr. Topper will put out his hand for the handshake, and Stephen Shaw will take his hand and shake his hand. Now, if it's an informal situation, it's pretty much the same way at the beginning. Have you met each other? No, we haven't. So then you can say, Scott, this is Stephen. Stephen, this is Scott. And then they will use the informal expressions. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Okay? So these expressions, pleasure to meet you, nice to meet you, they can take you a long way in introducing yourself and in introducing others. Now, of course, there are many ways to introduce yourself. Not only what I've said here, not only what I've taught you here, but I always advise my students that it's better to learn one way properly than to learn 3 different ways and then get mixed up. Okay? So make sure you have mastered one way to introduce yourself and to introduce other people, and then you could move on to other variations, because you are definitely going to hear a variety of variations on this. Okay? So if you'd like to practice this a little bit, go to our website, www.ingvid.com, and you can do a quiz on how to introduce yourself and how to introduce other people. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.